everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Divorce and Separation Coach podcast. Today, we're going to talk about how to manage stress and anxiety during divorce, leveraging sophrology. Now, we all know that divorce as a whole is stressful. It's actually the second most stressful life event according to the Holmes and Rahe scale. But there's also certain events during the divorce process that can be really triggering. Things like, well, telling your spouse that you've decided to divorce, or announcing the news to your children, attending court hearings, family mediation meetings, even meetings with your solicitor. All of those events can be really stress inducing, and having the effective techniques to handle that is really important. So, to share with us some information and some tips on how to prepare for these stress inducing situations, I've invited Corinne Guion. Corinne is a sophrologist, and she works with individuals to help them build resilience and deal optimally with whatever challenges they're facing. Corinne uses simple techniques that are based on physical and mental techniques, and they're easy to learn so that her clients spend a few sessions working with her, but then they can use those techniques on their own time in any setting, and especially at any relevant point during their divorce process. Corinne, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And you summarized sophrology and the benefits better than I could. Thank you, Chloe. Well done.
So we can stop the podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Seriously, though, I would love to hear from you as a sophrologist. If you could explain to us in your own word what sophrology is, it'd be really helpful starting point.
Yes, sorry for the funny word indeed. It's a Greek name, as medical people like to use. So in summary, in few words, sophrology is a mind and body technique for well-being, mind and body practice. Yeah. And it is literally the intersection between mindfulness and yoga. Mindfulness because we are more dynamic than mindfulness. We go in the body. And intersection with yoga because we are less demanding than yoga. We don't require any physical ability or special equipment. So it very much is in the middle, mind and body, body and mind, for well-being, for optimal health. It was developed in the medical world in neuropsychiatry, so by a neuropsychiatrist. But obviously it is very simple technique, as you said, that we can use every day without equipment, sitting on our chair, in the office, at home, at work. Hence why it's a very good tool for people going through a divorce, preparing for a divorce, going through it, and then the aftermath of a divorce. They have tools to prepare, they have tools to deal with whatever is thrown at them in an optimal way.
Yeah, so you don't need any special equipment or anything like that?
Absolutely not. The techniques that we use are the techniques that we have. So we use breathing. We learn to use breathing to our advantage, to change our state of mind or our state of emotion. We use guided meditation. So very simple meditations, which again helps to calm us down. We use relaxation. It's not the aim, but we use relaxation technique to get to a specific state of mind. And finally, we use visualization. So we use the power of the mind, particularly relevant to the divorce, to see us succeeding and to start painting what's the new life that I want, what is my goal and where am I going. So very simple technique, breathing, a little bit of the body, a little bit of meditation, visualization, accessible to everybody, all ages, people with disabilities as well.
Brilliant. And so actually you're mentioning that it's accessible to everybody. Are there any specific challenges that sophrology is particularly well suited to address? Thinking depression, anxiety, things like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would say that the two main points is stress management and regulation of emotions.
Yeah.
And obviously stress management and regulation of emotion, what does that mean? What we are managing is the impact of those things on our body. So we're trying to minimize the impact that stress is going to have. And stress impacts us in three ways: physiologically, lack of sleep, digestive issues, we may start getting hot, we can't talk, we blush, we freeze. Also, it affects us emotionally. Some people range from bursting into tears to anger to even aggressive behavior. And also in the mind, some people will find that when they're stressed, they suffer from toxic thoughts. They have a racing mind and they have ruminating thoughts that are not helpful. So stress management, that's what it means in a practical way. And obviously regulating those emotions, that's super important. And the last point, once we've done that and we've worked on that, a really interesting point in sophrology is to prepare for. As you know, we shared our work with teenagers to help them and young adults with their exams, GCSEs, A-levels, university. So once we've managed to regulate this stress and those emotions, we are in a position to prepare, like your clients, preparing for difficult meetings, seeing your ex or your future ex, having conversations about the children, the tribunal, attorneys, solicitors. Those are difficult conversations. We can prepare.
That's great. I mean, the stress is obviously, I mean, the whole experience of divorce is stressful. And then, as I said, there's those specific events, but emotional management, that really also, reverberates with me, that term, because that's a huge part of being able to divorce in a less conflictual way, is to be able to accept the emotions you have, and they will be strong emotions, but not let them cloud your judgment in the way you're proceeding.
You're absolutely saying it. I mean, science proves it, and it's normal when our reaction to a stressful situation leads us into emotions, and emotions that we cannot control, and they start overflowing. What happens is that our brain shuts down.
Yeah.
Our rational mind shuts down. So imagining in negotiation of a divorce, whatever negotiation at whatever levels, we are not thinking straight. So
we're in survival mode.
And that's the problem. So we need to regulate those, so we are better able to take a step back. And while all this thing is happening, and probably the other person is being emotional, but we are in control, and we can actually get to where we want to be. So we are in a rational mind. We're going to have strategies coming up. We're going to be the best that we can be at that moment. And the key, you said it, it really is regulating the emotions, managing them so they don't cloud our ability to succeed in whatever it is we want to do. In this instance, negotiating whatever it is they're negotiating through their divorce.
So I'm assuming you work with quite a few people who are going through divorce or separation. How do you help them to prepare for these specific situations where they know they're going to be triggered?
So what we do is two things, preparing them for that. It's going to be very clear. We need to, first of all, get this stress under control. We need to understand, and again, the regulation under control. And then we need to understand what emotions are the most overpowering. There's generally four main categories of emotion. Joy is okay. We don't need to do anything with that. We have anger, which is generally the problem. We can also have fear and sadness. So whatever those emotions, I need to understand, and then we need some tools. So I'm going to show them some practical tools. And the point of the sessions is for them to have two things. The first one is an emergency toolkit. So before they go to a meeting, and I'm going to demonstrate a little exercise in a minute for that, when they go into the meeting, what do? Because they're going to feel these emotions are coming in. They're going to start sweating. The heart is pounding, whatever it is, the manifestation of stress. What do you do then? And the other aspect is also to have the sort of regular practice every day to build their resilience over the long term. Divorce is a marathon, as we discussed it before. It is such a long term. So we need to build a resilience. But we also need to have a tool before I go into that meeting. What do I do when I start losing it, in inverted commas?
Yeah, that's great.
So is it the good time for you if we start exploring little techniques? So what we do, first of all, is the breathing. It's the breath. Now, also because we have it with us at all times. So you're all dressed up about to go into the tribunal or going to see your attorney or your solicitor. Well, you don't have time for anything else. You have your breathing with you. So it is about managing this breath. So I'm just going to show you very quickly, if you want to do it with me, what we can do straight away to regulate this breathing. So standing or sitting, wherever the person is, they can have their eyes closed, they can have their eyes open, whatever environment. If they can sit down and have their eyes closed, perfect. Otherwise, not a problem. And what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in 3 different counts, almost, in fact, you've seen my finger, for those of you who can see me, almost as if we were drawing a triangle. So we're going to breathe in as we go up the triangle, the one side of the triangle. We're going to breathe out on the other side. And then we're going to hold as we go at the bottom of the triangle. So you can imagine in your mind's eyes drawing that triangle. You can use your finger, perhaps not if you're about to go into a meeting. So it is about synchronizing your breath, regulating your breath, and the count probably 2 or 3, whatever is comfortable. So if you can, just invite you to practice very briefly. So you're breathing in normally, but you're breathing in through the nose. Let's say 1, 2, 3. Breathing out, 1, 2, 3, and holding 1, 2, 3. So as you can see, nobody's going to notice you're doing that unless they're really staring at you. And you do that for probably 2 to 3 minutes. If you have time, perhaps for a little bit more. And you will notice how very quickly your heartbeat is lowering. If you were experiencing redness or you're sweating or you find your throat is dry, this will come down immediately. And you will also find your mind is clearer because you're focusing your mind on mentally drawing this triangle or trying to synchronize this breath or counting 2 to 3, whatever it is. And you practice that for 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So as you can see, that's very practical. It's very easy. We've known about these breathing techniques for a long time. I mean, yoga is not exactly, recent. And it's just making sure we practice enough so then it becomes an emergency toolkit. And the moment we use that, from being here, we come back down. And then we are able to do what it is we need to do. Does that make sense?
It does. And it makes, it's something that I think a lot of us use, but not quite as structured as what you've described. So that's really, really helpful. And I can see how, in preparing for the meeting, so those 5 minutes before you step into the room, you would want to do that. Would it be a tool that people can leverage during the meeting if they're being, if they feel attacked or defensive or upset from the conversation? Would they need to step away and do it, or can they just do it in that context?
So a couple of things I would always say, it's probably best at that point to ask for a break so you can sort of leave the room, and I'm sure you're better at advising them for that, and then they can do a bit of breathing. This one might be a little bit tricky in front of people. Another one that's also quite helpful is just to observe your breath. So whilst people are talking, it is just sitting comfortably, because you would be sitting at those meetings, presumably, in a relaxed position, as relaxed as you can be, and you're just trying to listen to your breathing. So you're still listening to what they're saying, but you're observing your body breathing, and you think, what's moving? My abdomen, the chest, you can feel your shoulders perhaps are moving. Just noticing the rhythm of your breath. Just by doing that, you're calming down your nervous system. And again, that's not something that people are going to notice. If anything, they're going to see that your face is quite calm, as opposed to starting to build up and about to jump and react. So it's just sitting back in the chair and just observing the breath, just observing how you are breathing. And if you can, trying to deepen the breath slightly. So again, it's a bit slower if you can do that. That is absolutely part of the emergency toolkit. But of course, I would say at some point, it is about coming out of the room and perhaps releasing some tensions. We may cover anger a bit later on. I've got a really good exercise for releasing anger, which I'm sure we'll cover later on.
Divorce.
Yeah, that's probably the one that needs to be addressed in an emergency. As well.
So all of these tools, really, what they do is, because they're making you focus on something else. In this case, you're breathing. You're moving out of your amygdala into that fight or flight mode into your rational brain, and you're able to disconnect from that kind of natural reaction to the context and try and get more into more thoughtful approach and a way of approaching things that's not triggered, basically.
Totally. It balances the two nervous system. The one that's the fight and flight you've mentioned, which is about releasing the stress hormones. The moment we start breathing and we start pushing the brake pedal, that's literally what we're doing. We're stepping out of this into the normal function of the body. So therefore, our brain can function naturally, because we're not in a stress situation where we need to run. So we can think straight. And it's quite amazing, talking about the theory, you think, how does that work? But when you practice it, it's so clear. Your mind all of a sudden is clear, functions. And let's not forget, the other party might not be able to manage their emotions as well as you do. Therefore, you have an advantage there. Unless they know about sophrology, they're probably not able to control their emotions.
Yeah.
Which is
that comes up a lot, actually, because I work with a lot of my clients on de-escalating conflict, because there's so many conversations that happen in the context of a divorce. Many times couples are still cohabitating as they're going through all of this, but even if they're not, they're co-parenting, probably, they're interacting. And so conflict arises. And I think the big tool that people forget about in the context of a conflict is to step away. And sometimes you're just not in the right place to be having that conversation, and you're going to do or say things that aren't reflective of who you want to be. And so stepping away and using these techniques to kind of ground yourself and bring yourself back to where you want to be, I can see how those could be incredibly useful in that kind of context.
And when you work with a sophrologist, we have further techniques that I cannot demonstrate today, but one that is particularly helpful when interacting with conflict is the idea of the bubbles, visualizing that we are protecting ourselves in a bubble. So we gather all the resources that we have, we are the best that we can be first, and then we close this sort of bubble when we interact with the world, but the world cannot reach us unless we decide. So again, it's about exactly what you said, putting that sort of, step away, that sort of distance between this is who I am and this is the outside world. Let's take a step back, let's think and act as opposed to react. And that's when the management and the regulation of emotions work. But the idea of the bubble, and the more you practice it with a sophrologist and you're able to do that, really does help. So you are able to sit in a conflictual meeting, seeing yourself, being centered, being anchored, feeling yourself, looking at the others, but not necessarily having to jump in.
Yeah. And
And
that can come up a lot. I mean, throughout the divorce, but also in life afterwards, in and outside of your family life, there's so many times where you're in those kind of conflictual conversations where you feel that you can easily tip to the wrong side, and so knowing how to stop that and to regulate.
And it's practicing it, it's training our brain and our body to react in a different way, so we are not at the mercy of our emotions. Feeling emotions is very natural, but we can reprogram, is a strong word, but rewire the way we react so that it's more healthy and it serves us, as opposed to when we are emotional, it's extremely rare that it serves us in whatever context. And I can't imagine in the context of divorce, it does not serve us. We don't show the best part of ourselves. And therefore, we're not able to negotiate what we want.
Absolutely. So you mentioned earlier anger. How do you help people regulate that? Because that's another emotion, as we said, that comes up a lot in divorce and that can misguide people.
Absolutely. Anger is probably the one that trips the most. So anger, again, two approaches. There's always the emergency toolkit. And there is then obviously the longer term practice. So the first thing to do with anger is to acknowledge that we feel anger. And I know that's particularly difficult, and in our culture, and I have to say, in many cultures, I've found that women particularly are not allowed to feel anger. So we sort of deny that we're feeling anger. So the first step is to accept that we're feeling angry, and it's perfectly normal. And actually, we can use it as a fuel to move forward. So the first thing to do is to acknowledge that. The moment we acknowledge that we're feeling anger, there's a scale between 0 and 100. And initially, we're probably going to jump to 100 quite quickly. And with those practices, we're going to start becoming more in control. Doesn't mean we don't feel anger. It means we can actually control it better. And when it starts coming out and we're going towards the 100, we need to release it. Which probably in the case of, if it is a negotiation, if you can put the phone down and say, I'll call you back, then you can release it. So the exercise, shall I show you now what the exercise is?
Absolutely.
So in an emergency, and that applies to all sorts of situations, and it's particularly helpful with my teenagers, actually my boys, the teenage boys that I work with, that seem to get anger and then they can't control it. So you can do this exercise standing up or sitting down, or even lying down in your bed. But as an emergency, do it in whatever position you're in. And here you are synchronizing your breath. You do this exercise 3 times. So I'm just going to explain first, and then we can perhaps practice. I can show you. So first, you're breathing in deeply. Then you are retaining your breath, holding your breath and tensing the whole body gently. And whilst you're tensing the whole body and holding your breath only for a couple of seconds, you're gathering everything you need to get rid of, which could be even a swear word about this person, whatever it is that makes you angry. And then you breathe out through the mouth deeply, and you let go. So the body releases, the body relaxes. And as you do that, you are releasing whatever it is that you were holding. Again, it's based on that principle, and it's very true that anger also lives in our body. It doesn't just live.
Yes, it does.
Where does it live? It's also in our body. So we do that 3 times. I'll just show you now. So you breathe in, gentle tension of the whole body, and you gather whatever it is that you want to get rid of. Breathing out, releasing. Deep releasing, breathing out through the mouth if it's comfortable. You can breathe out a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. And then a second time, breathing in, gentle tension of the whole body. And then breathing out. Breathing out when you need to, and then it can be really loud. So perhaps at that stage, you need to go to the toilet or to the corridor if you are in a meeting. And then one last time, you breathe in, gentle tension. And releasing. And some people find it helpful to stretch their arms in front of them, on their side, above their head. It doesn't matter. The point is to really tense and to gather. So this could be physical tension. In the case of anger, is identifying, not dwelling, but identifying what makes you angry. He said that, or she said that. You grab it and then you throw it out. 3 times. If you need more, but generally 3 times works a treat. So this is the emergency toolkit. But this exercise is also your daily teeth brushing exercise. So at the end of every day, particularly when you're going through the divorce, because it's going to be, as we said, a marathon, every night, clean the slate. So tomorrow morning is a new day. And what happened yesterday, you're not going to drag it on. It's not going to hold you back emotionally. Equally, you're not necessarily going to bring it up again in the next conversation, which may not be helpful. So at the end of every day, when you come home from work, you may have a shower, you may have a cup of tea, glass of water. Think of doing this exercise and gathering whatever it is that's annoyed you during the day or not sat well with you. Get rid of it. Travel light.
I love that. And I could almost, when I was doing it, I could almost visualize the little words floating in my head and then breathing them out, ejecting them physically from my body.
And accepting, you know, without judgment. It could be that actually you literally see the person, but you're not harming them, you're just getting rid of them. And it may be a swear word that comes to you. And it is okay. It's only between you and yourself. No judgment, kindness. But this is a great tool to identify what is happening. Because if we don't identify, it continues in a loop, emotionally, in our mind, and then it trips us. Get rid of it, move forward. Does that make sense?
Great. Yeah, it's perfect. I think there's a lot of people who, I mean, there's of course a lot of anger during divorce. It often feels very unfair, very hurtful. Yes. But then that anger can continue for years afterwards. And it's very hard to heal and to rebuild your life if you're still holding on to that. So I love the idea of that daily practice to learn to rid yourself of it.
Absolutely. In the emergency, doing it every day helps. And also, so that's the first cycle, the first layer of sophrology in a few sessions. And what we do after that, because there's a deeper work to be done, and you mentioned it, is accepting. Because it is long-term. Your spouse, ex-spouse is always going to be the mother or the father of your children. They're always going to be in your life, and the in-laws or whatever it is. So some things we cannot change. We have to accept. If we've been betrayed, whatever it may be. So working on acceptance is really important. That would be the second layer. And then the third phase would be about dreaming your life and what you're going to be next. And again, sophrology is a good self-development tool because we cover all of those as we go deeper in our practice. So we start with the stress management, regulation of emotions, knowing our body, how we function, how can we function better? How can we have this optimal well-being and health? And then we work a bit deeper on this acceptance, which is particularly relevant in divorce, but it is also in life in general. I've lost my job. What can I do about it? I accept what I cannot change. And that wisdom is hard. And we got some techniques for that, and some visualization, some guided meditation that helps us, encourages us to reflect. And then we start visualizing, where am I going next? What's my next life? And then we start seeing it in bright colors and rebuild. Not rebuild, continue our life and build it the way we want. So we can work with all those aspects.
Right. I mean, the other one that I see a lot as an issue after divorce is for people to rebuild their self-confidence and their sense of self. Is there any work they can do with using sophrology to help them through that as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because the first part is the body. So we reconnect with our inner voice. So once we've cleared all these emotions and we're not in that because the divorce is done, etc., we're working in acceptance. What we do in sophrology through those meditations and visualizations is we connect with the inner voice. Who are we inside? The sort of child, you know, we knew it when we were a child. We had that connection with the inner voice and we start losing it. And as we do that, we build our confidence. We reconnect with the essence of who we are. And then who we are today, clean the slate of what has happened and the pain that's been caused to us, but we reconnect with our essence. And from that, I do some creative exercises where people who are in transition, it's more career transition for me, or sort of middle age, where people all of a sudden they think, wow, I never thought of doing this, but actually I'm going to set up a knitting shop. Because once we reconnect with who we are, we start dreaming again. So
everything becomes
building
possible.
the self-confidence and enabling people to move on with the next chapter the way they want to do it. So most definitely, those are the deeper levels. We don't always work with people at that level, unless obviously they say, I want to explore the next options of my life. So we go through all these different, actually we've got 4 different levels in depth. So that's
okay.
yeah. So it's really
Oh, that's
interesting.
great. I mean, I recognize so many of the feelings that come up during divorce and that I see with my clients that I experienced through my own divorce in what you're saying, and having that emergency toolkit. I think that's brilliant in the mix of that emergency toolkit that you can draw upon like this when you're in that situation, and the longer term practice that becomes part of your day-to-day routine.
Yes.
That seems to me like a really good combination for people because they can draw on the right
Because it
one.
works. But I think also the emergency toolkit, and we do that in the very first session, is really important because you talked about self-confidence. It gives you it empowers you. And immediately people feel, wow, I don't have to be at the mercy of. I'm not worried I'm
Yeah,
going to have a panic attack or whatever. I know I've got the tools to cope with that. And then the more they practice it, the more they see, well, actually, it works. So it
yeah,
really, from day one, it changes their outlook. And
yeah,
that's really part of regulating the emotions, because they don't have this fear of thinking, oh my God, I'm going to burst again, I'm going to explode, or I'm going to cry, or I'm going to be angry. Knowing that you can regulate that the
yeah.
best you can, nothing's perfect, but knowing that gives you confidence that you have the tools and the resources. We all have them. We've got to dig deep. The resources to handle this very challenging situation, particularly with your help. Once you have your help as well, God, it's so empowering to know that you're not alone and you're getting advice from people who know. And all you have to do is listen to it, take your time, breathe, and
And
then
then you
go
have
for it.
some control over the situation. I think that's often, the fear that comes up. And I always tell people fear is a question you don't have an answer to. And what is that question for you? Is it, can I survive on my own? Is it, will I be a good enough parent on my own? Those kind of questions. And so being able to gain control of the situation takes away a lot of the fear. And that's where people feel a lot more empowered and a lot more at ease through the process. And then they tend to be more relaxed and to be
Yes.
their best self through that process as well.
Absolutely relaxed and empowered, giving you the confidence, perhaps. So again, in sophrology, you can work in the early stages when the person is not sure they want to separate, and
Mhm.
that can take, well, you'll know more than me, but sometimes it's a couple of years in the
Yeah,
process. So
many
you
years
think,
usually.
I'm thinking about it, but I'm not sure because again, I've got fear. So it's working on all of those things. So we can all live a life in authenticity, true to ourselves, true to our values, and build the life that we want and
Absolutely.
the best that we can. Yes.
I love that. And so tell me, on average, how long do people work with you? Is it a couple of sessions and then they're off, or do they work
Five
with
to
you long
six
term?
sessions is a really good start, particularly when we start the first phase in this instance, which is about stress management and regulating emotions, having your emergency toolkit, as well as the sort of more long-term 5 to 6 sessions. So in fact, it's 1+5. So the first one is the initial consultation. So I really get to understand the challenges. We talk
Yeah.
about how the person experiences stress, how stress impacts them and manifests itself. So then I can tailor. And then we do 5 sessions, and really you have a really solid base there. And then we can add up. Obviously, if then we're looking about acceptance and we're looking about further emotions, self-confidence, building your life. But I work in chunks of 5. And then we see how we progress. So obviously people will need to practice. Without practice, I think, it's not the miracle tool. I am not the fairy godmother. In fact, I wouldn't wish to be. So it's about practicing. But once people see the benefit of those techniques, which, as you saw, are very easy, they don't ask, you don't need to do it for 40 minutes a day. It's just as and when and regularly. People actually, they feel a benefit, particularly this tension release. Everybody loves it.
Yeah.
It becomes the bread and butter from the teenagers to board directors. People think, oh, and they do it. So it becomes part of your routine. So it's
Yeah.
quite powerful and in a relatively short period of time, which
Really
is always
impressive, because I mean, it's also a tool that you keep with yourself for the rest of your life.
yes,
So you can use it
absolutely.
time and time again. You might have learned it in the context of your divorce, but you can use it next time you have a conflict at work or with one of your children or whatever.
Yes, and particularly with the children, because again, that's really hard to be a parent. So there's a lot of things that align with parenting,
Yeah.
particularly teenagers, as I know. So I've
You don't
practiced a
say.
lot.
I've got the experience at home right now.
Yeah, so I'm sure the tension release may help, and also the bubble. So whatever our teenagers say to us, when it's not reaching us.
Yes, I think that's a very good approach to not getting too upset about the things that get thrown at you.
I think it's fantastic. The tools that are out there, and as I said, some of the tools are mindfulness and yoga, and our method was developed in the 60s. Yoga is much more ancient, so they've been out there. It's just now we're becoming aware that these tools and these techniques are out there to benefit us. And it is such a shame not to use it. They are very simple, they're very practical, and they really do enhance our life, whatever the challenge, and particularly with divorce, because the outcome is so important. Being able to negotiate, whether it's obviously the financial aspect, the aspect with the children, what's happening with housing, etc., different countries, travel, whatever it may be. So it's very important. Everything we do at this stage influences the outcome. So get all the tools that you can.
Absolutely. And I mean, self-care is so important during divorce. And this is really the best way to protect yourself, is to learn how to manage that stress, because that's hurting yourself directly. It's
Indeed.
self-inflicted pain.
Oh yeah, the impact on we know the impact of stress on the organs. We know scientifically what it does over a long period of time, of course. And the problem with divorce is that it can take a long time. It's not 3 months. It can be, it's probably rare, I mean, but it takes a long time. So there is definitely an impact on the health, mental health and physical health and the organs. So it's very important, absolutely. It's about looking after your life optimally, so also you can look after your children and help them through this. So it's about
like putting your oxygen mask in the plane first. You know, you need to be okay to be able to help the children.
True. It is very true. If we're not resilient ourselves, we cannot help our children through that. So it's important to do that and to put ourselves first, as opposed to the children first, which we tend to do. First of all, we've got to look after our needs, so we are in the best possible physical, mental, and emotional condition to face the challenge.
Yeah, and to be there for them.
With your help, of course, and you guiding them through that process.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you just one last question. Focusing again on that kind of practical element, what would be your 3 tips to somebody who's really struggling with their divorce and would like to use sophrology as a way of helping them deal with the stress?
So it's that 3-pronged approach, that 3-layer approach. Release the anger, which is probably likely to be the one that you have the most. Fear is more hard to work with, it's different. Release this anger, whatever it takes. If it takes screaming, scream. Go into a room and scream. People talk about using a towel and banging it on the table or whatever, provided your kids are not around. Do what you need. The exercise I showed you, release the anger. Then it's about doing the groundwork, so the day-to-day routine. So take a pause, learn to pause every day. Just if you're sitting and listening to your breath, or even daydreaming about your future, take a pause every day. That's building your resilience. Ideally, 3 minutes a day for 3 to 5 minutes. But even if it's just once a day for 5 minutes, sit on a chair, close your eyes, listen to your breath, and then if your mind starts wandering, daydream about your future or your next holiday or whatever, next outfit, whatever it is you're going to do, take a pause. And the 3rd level, and that's a little bit harder, it's, cultivate acceptance. Whatever it is, through reading, poetry, of course, working with a sophrologist, we can help with that, but also therapists, counselors can help with that. And so there's books, there's poetry, there's things, learn to develop, to nurture acceptance. What you cannot change, accept. Only fight the battles you are going to win. With the advice, obviously, of your divorce coach or whoever you are using, who's around you. So really that 3-pronged approach. Have your emergency, work on it every day, and developing a new philosophy of life. And those 3 tips really for everything in life, but particularly for the challenge of divorce. I hope it makes sense, but they are very useful.
I do, and I agree. They're absolutely applicable to so many challenges in life. So I love that, those skills can be applied in various contexts and various situations. Really helpful, and I really loved having the practical exercises with you and being able to practice it. I'll definitely leverage that. So thank you very much.
Plenty more, because it really is about, there's lots of breathing techniques, lots of physical techniques to release. So it's let's use our body and our mind and our breath, because we've got all of that at our disposal. So it really does work. And it's been a pleasure. It's been amazing working with you and what you do to help others and to really make sure that they get the best possible outcome. And thank you for giving me the chance to explain a little bit how we can, alongside how we can help with this stress and this regulation of emotions, which is the key, really.
Well, thank you for joining us, especially for sharing all those tips and information. It's really helpful. What I'll do is, in the description of the episode, there will be your contact information. So if anybody wants to reach out to Corinne, whether they're going through a divorce or any other upset in life and they feel they need that support, it sounds like a really useful tool. And having that emergency toolkit that you can draw upon when you find yourself in those situations, as well as building that ongoing practice, are really two keys that go hand in hand and that will really help throughout your life. So definitely recommend reaching out to Corinne. Thank you very much.
Thank you.